suppose you've all heard that there was recently a rather high-profile contest for the leadership of the free world, to lead, to determine how we live, how we work. But it had nothing to do with those two. Nothing to do with Hillary Clinton, nothing to do with Donald Trump. No, that contest is in large part between these two, President Xi of China and Elon Musk. Now, most of you know Elon Musk. He's the head of Tesla, the electric cars, car batteries, Solar City, and now these pods that will go quickly between New York and Washington in a few minutes. But what about President Xi? In what capacity is he in that contest? As the government leader who sits across from Donald Trump, as government officials try to listen to themselves speak? Not at all. Xi's in the contest as the leading venture capitalist in the world, as the one who is financing 20 Chinese battery companies to compete against each other to make the battery. In fact, Xi is in charge of 62% by 2020 of the world's electric batteries. Look at this map. That's the leading battery companies in the world. You see the two little ones down in the United States, and take a look at China. So that's the real contest, and why are they doing it? Are they doing it to turn the world green? Not at all. They're doing it to capture the car market, to control how we transport, how we live, and how we work, to knock out Ford and Chrysler and GM. So that's the real contest. And if that's the real contest, what were these two competing for? They were competing for royalty. Now, royalty's not so bad. It has fame and adulation, but it doesn't control people. It doesn't have the power to decide in truth how we live or how we work. So who now controls? Who now controls how we power our plants or treat our earth? Who now controls where people will live, where people will work? Do we have urban blight in inner cities? Or do we have cities where people come in and live? Who now controls how we transport? Government, regulators, environmental laws? Who now controls even foreign relations, war and peace? Is that governments? If so, why did I just say that these two, Clinton and Trump, were competing to be figureheads? Well, let's take a look. Huxley had so much right in his book, Brave New World. He knew that the Brave New World would focus on technology, and technology would advance, and he even knew that it would change the fundamental relationship between people and their government. But he had it backwards. Huxley thought that technology would cause government to become all-powerful. That would be more like Fidel Castro or Putin. And in fact, technology has made government irrelevant. And it becomes more irrelevant day by day. You see, technology has created freedom, self-determination. It doesn't change the form of government. It's not that we went from autocracy or oligarchy to democracy. Democracy is where people get to vote for their government. The technology has changed the nature of transactions. Transactions that were societal transactions where government had to regulate, to transactions that are now one-on-one, microtransactions, us and our technology, and in that world, government has no role to play. So the fundamental question for the Brave New World was, who would have the final say about all of our tomorrows? Would that be the entrepreneurs and the technologists? And I say yes. Or would that be the government? Let's take a look. First issue, climate control. Who's going to save our planet? Who's going to determine climate? And it was the essence of arrogance to believe that government officials could convene in 2001 in Kyoto or in 2015 in Paris, and government officials would dictate to the rest of us that we would save our planet and how we would do it, as if they could do that with a pen. And because of that arrogance, George Bush believed in 2001 that if he walked out of Kyoto, he could save the world the way he liked it. Big cars out of Detroit, powered by oil and gas in Texas, and that would control our climate future. George Bush wasn't in charge. That man was in charge, and none of you even recognize him. That man's name was George Mitchell, and he invented fracking. He found fracking. He understood if you shoot air and water and chemicals against rocks, you could get a heck of a lot more gas out that way. And gas was cheaper than oil, and that gas was cleaner than oil. So after George Bush walked out of Kyoto thinking governments would control our climate, the U.S. lowered the carbon footprint from that minute, the minute George Bush left Kyoto, until the minute that Barack Obama entered Paris. The U.S. lowered its carbon footprint more than every country that stayed in Kyoto combined. Think about that. We walked out as a government, but we came in as a technology. We only changed to natural gas and changed our refrigerant standards, and we lowered our carbon footprint more than all the countries that remained in Kyoto combined. And it was just as arrogant to believe that Barack Obama going to Paris or Donald Trump leaving Paris, that's going to decide our carbon future, whether we save our planet, that those government regulators had some say. The people who were having say was President Xi with his 20 battery companies, and Elon Musk and George Mitchell, not royalty acting as governments. It was sort of as if in Paris they had a food convention, and they decided we're all going to eat more lasagna. Well, I got news for you. It's the chefs who determine if we eat lasagna, not the governments. And in this case, the chefs are the people who have made offshore wind cheaper than oil and gas, or solar, or electric cars, or fracking, or Xi, or George Mitchell, or Elon Musk. Let's take a look at the next issue, a related issue. Who controls where we live and where we work? Who controls whether we live in inner cities or they have inner city blight? Who controls if we commute from the suburbs using those big cars or not? Does it government that controls law enforcement and zoning regulations? Absolute nonsense. Law enforcement and zoning regulations had 50 years to clean up inner cities, to clean up Times Square, to clean up downtown Washington. They tried for 50 years and they couldn't do it, but that's Times Square today, one of the highest real estate markets in New York where people live and people work. And how did it get cleaned up? Well, the problem was there were societal transactions going on. Adult movie theaters, prostitution, gambling. And in a world where that existed, people had to go to the inner cities to get it, and no one could live in the inner cities. But if you take those societal transactions and you make one-on-one transactions, you make microtransactions through technology, who cleaned up Times Square? YouPorn and Craigslist. YouPorn took the adult movie theaters, put it in the bedrooms, a one-on-one microtransaction, and the adult movie theaters didn't get legislated out of existence. They went broke. Craigslist and others took prostitution off the streets, and they opened our inner cities. The gambling websites did the same. So now you can live in the inner cities. Now you can have the highest real estate be downtown Washington or Times Square. Government could never do what technology did. What about fundamental questions? How we buy, how we shop. That's always been culturally different. Belgians like your cheese shop. You like your boutique to buy shirts. America 50 years ago moved to a mall economy. But either way, those are societal transactions. You need to accommodate them. You need to have zoning laws. You need to regulate them. But here's the news. Technology has come in. They're all gone. They're leaving day by day. The cheese shop is leaving. The malls are leaving. Retail is leaving. Today, this is the shopping. Why would anybody go either to a cheese shop or dairy shop or a food store and buy eggs for $3 that they have to carry back if you can press a button and the eggs will appear on ice for 99 cents. And that's what happens in Manhattan today, so you don't need food stores and you don't need malls. It's not the zoning boards that are determining where we live, where we work, where we buy. It's Jeff Bezos. And that matters, again, for real estate, because if you don't have to shop, you can live in places, inner cities. That's a Wall Street building. That used to be commercial, and you would commute to the suburbs to live, and then you'd work there. Because there was no rooms for retail. There were no rooms to shop. It doesn't matter anymore. And of course, while we're living and buying differently, we're working differently. We're working on our phones. We're working out of those same buildings. We're pushing the buttons to have the eggs, and we're going to work. And of course, we're transporting differently. If we're downtown, who needs to own a car and insurance and gas? We'll just hit a button and we'll transport by Uber or Lyft. It's a one-on-one microtransaction. It's not a societal transaction. And when we travel, we don't need hotels and we don't need zoning boards to tell us. We'll have a microtransaction to tell us where we stay in Airbnb. And in fact, it's one step more. It's not just that governments become irrelevant, it's become disregarded. Because even when government tells us you can't do Airbnb, or you can't do Uber, or you can't put music on the net, the market and the microtransaction takes over and says, we're going to do it anyway. And so it does. What's the most important microtransaction? Fundamental learning. We don't have government-set curriculums and boards of education. We learn every day, our children learn every day, one-on-one, right from the web. But certainly this can't apply for foreign policy, can it? Can it apply for fundamental war and peace, a 5,000-year-old conflict between Arabs and Jews? Clearly that has to turn on Clinton or Obama or Netanyahu or Abbas or Jared Kushner or somebody. Not at all. That 5,000-year-old war got solved not by governments. Governments haven't told you it's been solved. It got solved by technology. It got solved by Israel developing desalinization plants, by an American company, Noble, and an Israeli company, Delek, finding gas. And so in the last 2 weeks, Israel signed a $15 billion gas deal with Egypt, which will supply Egypt and Turkey. 2 years ago, they signed a desalinization and gas deal with Jordan that supplies Jordan and the Palestinians. And nobody blows up their gas company. So technology has solved even that problem. Now, maybe there's one problem we think technology can solve. Maybe we think even government can solve it. Maybe that's only religion. But with Google working on endless life, I'm rooting for there. Thanks so much and all the best.